and PCB's organizer for this session. As always, I'm delighted to have you all here with us. Before we start, I would like to inform you that PCB is organizing PCB Certified Advanced Audit Techniques event, which will take place in Stockholm, Sweden from June 27 to July 1st. For more information, visit our website. Today's topic is ISO 45001 Simplified. To tell us more about it, joining us Ms. Deborah Hayhampton, PCB Certified Trainer and Lead Auditor, Quality and Environmental Management Systems. During the presentation, feel free to write your questions and comments in the question box in the right-hand control panel, or you can use the raise hand function. We will then unmute you, and you will have a chance to ask the question directly to Ms. Deborah. All of the other questions will be answered accordingly at the end of the presentation. Also, if you are aware of a topic that you would like to discuss and participants would benefit from, please feel free to write down your suggestions in the survey at the end of the webinar. We are strongly committed to providing our audience with updated and useful information. Please, Ms. Deborah, you may start the presentation.
Greetings and thank you. Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, attendees. I will put in another plug for the webinar, the seminar that's going to occur in Stockholm, Sweden. I'm going myself. That's how much faith I put in it, so I am looking forward to a week of learning with PECB in Stockholm in just a few weeks. I remind you, if you will, ask your questions, and because there's a lot of things that I'm going to be presenting this morning that may be new to you, and I'm not only an ISO 9001 lead auditor, but I'm also an EMS third-party auditor as well as an OH&S. ISO 45001 hasn't been released yet, but I am an OH&S 18001 third-party auditor. Let's begin. I'm going to begin by telling you what I'm going to tell you about. So these are the steps for implementing ISO 45001 Simplified. I'm going to remind you right this moment, if you'd like a copy of these 7 steps, please email me and I'll be glad to send you this document. So the steps for implementing ISO 45001 Simplified are outlined here, and we're going to talk about each one of these this morning quickly, but we're going to talk about them. Of course, there's much more to implementing, but not much more. This is the approach that you would use. So the first thing we want to talk about is what is the context of an organization. And if you would think about the context of any organization, they have external influences which force them, and I'm using OSHA here, which is, I realize, is American, but each country has their health and safety people that are putting regulations on them, as well as each organization has a community. As you talk about the context of your organization, you think about those people who influence, those organizations who influence you, and those people who influence you, and you think about what requirements you have in your system to make sure that you are meeting their expectations. And from that, you make decisions. So this is the first thing you do in implementing an ISO 45001 Simplified system. You determine the external and internal influences to determine the context of the organization. I'm going to stop at this moment and ask if there is anyone who is having difficulty hearing me on this live webinar, please raise your hand so that Susanna can interrupt me and ask me to speak differently. The second step is the leaders and workers set the policy and assign roles and responsibilities. Note, it is both. There must be participation by workers in setting the policy and assigning roles and responsibilities. Everyone has a role to play. Each will see the issues from a different perspective, and together it makes us have a stronger system. The third thing is to plan and identify risk and mitigate the risk. So the way that I identify risk when I am working with an organization, and I do quite a bit of consulting work, not only on-site consulting work, but I do consulting work with companies who I do it remotely. I help them remotely implement their systems. The first thing that we talk about is the processes of that organization, the processes and the activities. What do you do? And then who is accountable to manage risk in that process or activity? And then thirdly, what are the risks that are identified? So in the example I'm using, in the quoting and order processing of this organization, the customer care manager is accountable. But the risk identified are ergonomic issues, carpal tunnel syndrome, back issues, some of the things that can occur with people who sit all day long. Purchasing and receiving. In the receiving, the lead is the person responsible for managing the risk, and the risk identified is lifting. Of course, there's that chance that you may lift something that injures your back. Cutting your fingers, we all have to open boxes. We open packing slips and different things. And then there's also the possibility of pinching your fingers between containers as you're moving them around. As you can see, we continue down through the different processes, including and activities, including material handling, which causes us to think about risk identified. Whatever you do, it must be a systematic approach to determine what the risks are. The first step is to review activities and think of the risk in those activities. The next thing we want to do is to take those risks that we identified. Notice I didn't repeat them. I said, okay, ergonomics is an issue. It's an issue in many different areas, but what are its consequences, the likelihood of it occurring, and what is the severity if it does occur? These are very subjective, but it is a way to think about what you need to prioritize. Of course, you make the decision on how you're going to prioritize things. I would typically, if it's the most severe things, I would address them first. Mitigation or the treatment is the control. So you've identified the risk, and now you have identified what treatment you're going to use to mitigate that risk and keep it from being a problem that causes danger for the health and safety of your employees. So that is the third step. The fourth step is to determine the support needed. In determining the support needed, who do you need to talk to? Who do you need help from to implement these controls? You've got training maybe in your organization that may be you, but you may already have a full plate of activities. So where are you going to get the resources to help you to perform this training? How are you going to get the resources to pay for the safety knives? How are you going to get the guards put in at the pinch points? You can see here that you need support processes to help you to do this. And from this, I create a to-do list, action plan of activities that are going to occur, who has agreed to provide those resources, and then one more that says when they will provide those resources. And from there, we begin to implement the mitigations or the treatment. So this is step 4 of our plan to implement ISO 45001 or OSAS 18001 in a simplified manner. So here we're talking about other to-do lists that are created even after we have done our implementation to-do list. We also need operation to-do list. We're going to need someone to plan and execute the training ongoing and to keep the records. We're going to need someone to plan and execute documents to have evidence of controls in place. We need to list the pinch points. You list the burn spots. So as we continue through, we make these to-do lists that help us make sure that we not only find our tasks that have to be done in the very beginning, but also the tasks that have to be maintained. A performance evaluation then must begin, which is an internal audit or an evaluation of compliance to those controls. Do you remember the mitigation treatments that we identified? Those controls, we must continuously do audits to make sure that those controls that we put in place are effective and are continuing to stay in place. From this, we want to address any incidents, look for other potential health and safety issues, find root causes, and we want to loop back and edit our table that where we identified risk and where we control those risks. We want to edit our table with new information, edit our audits with the new requirements, and continuously repeat this effort until we come to a system where there are no accidents. These steps, even though they're very simple, when I have seen them implemented, followed through, and have been able to cycle through, those are organizations that do not have any lost time accidents. I encourage you to ask for a copy of these 7 steps, to follow these 7 steps so that your company can also become an organization without any incidents or accidents. Any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. These are words from Albert Einstein. So I encourage you, as you make your ISO 45001, stick to these steps. Remember, I did not tell you to create a manual. I did not tell you to create any procedures. None of those are needed. The standard does not require them. What is required is that risk table and how you are going to mitigate or control that risk. That is what is critical in your organization. Those other documents are not usually needed. And yet so many organizations have stacks of documents. I was in an organization the other day that I looked at their shelf of documents and they had 6 foot of documents. That's 2 meters, a shelf 2 meters long, full of documents. And yet they were still having incidents. So a simple system is a way to have a very effective system. One more thing to say to you, complexity is your enemy. Any fool can make something complicated. It's hard to make something simple. In case you don't recognize who this is, it's Richard Branson. And keep it simple, sweetie. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I'll turn it back over to Susanna. And if you have questions, let's talk about them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deborah, for this presentation. We actually have some questions. And the first question is, will companies hesitate to implement the new occupational standard?
Of course, those who are not going to think forward. I think that if you will implement the ISO 45001 and follow its principles, follow its philosophy, you will see a decrease in incidents in your organization.
Great. So the next question is, any idea when will the new standard roll out?
October 2016.
Okay, because we heard some news that it's going to be delayed up to the next year.
I have not heard that. There is a DIS copy available. You can buy it through the ISO store, ISO store, I think that's it, isostore.com. Just Google it and you can order the DIS. It's very similar to all the other standards that have been released in 2015, the ISO 9001 and ISO 45001, because it's based off of Annex SL. As a result of that, I can't imagine why they would delay it. I have not heard anything about that. So if you have some information, please make sure you share it with me and I'll share it with all the attendees.
Okay, will do. The next question is, what was the main reason that ISO has decided to create a new standard on occupational health?
Well, if you have been involved, we had one in the U.S. called OSAS 18001, and that was actually governed and managed by the British Standards Institute. That's who published this document. So we've had a standard, but now we could not get agreement from enough countries to release one that under the ISO heading, under the ISO committees. We were finally able to get enough countries to agree with us that we could release under ISO 45001. So it is now governed by the International Organization for Standardization.
Thank you. The next question is, should companies wait for ISO 45001 or go and implement OSAS 80001?
I think your real question there is, should I go for third-party registration? I would encourage you to implement to ISO 45001 DIS, which is the 7 steps that I presented to you here. I would go ahead and implement to that, even if there are delays in the standard. If the principles are there, and those principles are going to start already saving you in your employees' health and safety. What I would not do is go ahead this year and get registration to OSAS 18001. I would wait until it'll be spring probably before registrars are offering the registration to ISO 45001. It's only another 6 months or so if you haven't done it until now. I would wait until then to get the third-party registrar involved.
Thank you. The next question is, tell us the best way to convince any company to implement this standard.
Boy, I would be very rich if I could. You know, there's an old saying in the South, and of course I'm from South Georgia in the United States, that you can bring a mule to water, but you can't make him drink. And honestly, you can't make an organization that does not see the benefit implement ISO 18001. Some companies don't care about their employees in the way that they should. And those companies, you're not going to get them to do what's best for their employees. Those that care, I would approach it from the standpoint of saying, here's one more thing that we can do that is a systematic approach to us addressing all the potential hazards to our people's health and safety. And I would offer that systematic approach to them. That's the way I would sell it. You cannot improve anything unless it's consistent. And most health and safety organizations, there's not a systematic, consistent approach to implementation of that health and safety system in their organization, and therefore they don't get great results. If you follow the principles of the standard, that's when you start getting those great results, those no lost time organizations. Good question.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, it says, I did the OSAS lead auditors training, IRCA. Can I still be an auditor for the new standard when it rolls out?
There will be some upgrade training on the OSAS 18,000 from 18,001 to ISO 45,001. That will probably roll out November, December timeframe. You'll have to take that upgrade training if you want to continue doing the, to have the certifications behind your name that you are certified to ISO 45001.
Thank you.
But you won't have to repeat the lead auditor training. But let me put in a word here. Let me encourage you to look at getting your certification through PECB if you have not. I think PECB has a lot to offer, and we have seen traditional Exemplar Global and IRCA. I don't work for PECB, but I'm getting ready to move all my accreditations to, my certifications to PECB. So let me encourage you to look at that.
Thank you. The next question is, does the company need a consultant to monitor or provide any advice regarding the transition process?
Yes, if you have a culture that needs it. If you have a management group who is willing to allow you to change the culture, you don't need a consultant. But if you are in most organizations, implementing these principles is such a cultural change. Getting everyone to participate, to buy in, to get everything rolling in a systematic, consistent direction. Oftentimes you need that outside force to drive that. So the only way to answer that is try it without your consultant. But if you see you're bogging down, get that consultant in that has the ability to change cultures. Never hire a consultant that is not accredited to the standard that you want to implement. And never hire a consultant without talking to their past clients. So after you've done those two things, if you found a consultant that changes the culture of your organization into the principles and the culture of that standard, then go for it. It'll be well worth the money. It will catapult you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank you once again for this presentation, Ms. Deborah. It was our honor having you as a presenter, as always. I would also like to thank all the attendees for taking the time out of their busy schedule to join us. We hope you enjoyed this webinar. We received all of your questions, and because the time is limited, we will answer to your questions individually by email. Also, don't forget to check PCB's webinar schedule on our website, pcb.com, or just subscribe to our YouTube channel and be updated with our weekly webinars. Upcoming Monday, we are having a final webinar session for this round of PCB webinars. We will go into details regarding the transition to ISO 45001. Until then, have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.